Alrighty, so I'm Ashley Boyd, your host for the I Feel Everything Summit. Sarah, please introduce yourself and let us know who you are and what you do.
Hi, Ashley. Thanks for having me on the summit. I'm so happy to participate and share the information we can with as many people as possible. I'm a medical intuitive. I've been a professional medical intuitive for 40 years, and I became aware of what we used to call highly sensitive people, or people who were very psychic or seemed to just know so much more about what was going around with around them, many, many years ago. So I have developed programs to help people who are extremely sensitive, whether it's from whatever part of the spectrum they're on, to figure out how to ground their energy, come back to themselves, clear their energy, and begin to understand that their nervous system is completely different than everyone else's nervous system. It's always a shock. I mean, first you find out, nowadays we can call it being an empath, but you find out you are, and then you have to go back through your whole life,
yes,
and reevaluate everything that's happened in your life.
Totally.
Like, recalibrate. You have to recalibrate everything that's happened to you in your life in the context of being an empath.
Totally.
And so to me, it's a fascinating area. And I believe that empaths are going to be trending. It's going to be a big thing now.
I agree. I think that the word is getting out. I feel like you can find out a lot of information on the internet. It's good and bad, some of it. You just have to really do your research on what you're looking at and really make sure it's authentic. And how I do that is by contacting people and just asking, like just picking their brain a little bit and really feeling them out. But I find that what you just said, literally, like I got teary-eyed of literally going back all the way to when you were little, of really realizing what it means and feels to be an empath, because it now just makes so much sense. And I'm not exaggerating in any way, shape, or form. Of it was a total, it felt like a sledgehammer hitting my face when I figured out what I was and how and why I felt that way. Because I from very, very, very little, not only the empathic tendencies, but being highly sensitive as well, of pain. I would feel pain in a different way. And it was always like, I'll never forget it. This is even as an adult. The first time I felt pain in front of my husband, I hit my shin and I literally fell on the ground and I threw up. He was like, what? Like, you just barely hit your shin. I'm like, but you don't understand. It hurts so bad. And he thought it was batshit crazy, for lack of a better term. So once I figured now out that I'm empathic and sensitive, it totally is like, wow, it makes so much sense, because the way you describe the neurons, it's totally differently rewired.
Totally different. And when I first figured out that I felt other people's pain, I was 3 years old.
Wow.
And I was standing with a small group, 4 of us, of little 3-year-olds that we all shared backyards. And this little boy, Kenny, was all dressed up in his like cowboy outfit with the hat, the vest, and the holsters with the guns. And he took one of those guns. This was in 1953. Okay, I'm the grandmother of the group here. And he took out his little gun and with the caps in it, and he shot it into my girlfriend's ear.
Oh.
At that moment, felt her pain so strongly that it changed my life forever, because from that moment on, it was like something woke up in me, in my brain, and I started recognizing that I was feeling my grandmother's pain as she was going through breast cancer, my mother's depression, my little girlfriend's ear, and all of a sudden this burden, this heavy, heavy burden and shroud of darkness just came over me, because all of a sudden all those nervous system pathways were awakened in me consciously. And I was no longer able to be a little girl.
Yeah.
I felt like an adult immediately. I couldn't just like play in a carefree way.
Me
Because,
neither. It's crazy.
really?
Yeah. I mean, I was always told that I always acted older than I was. I was like the little adult in the room. I was always very methodical and very organized the way I would do things. And it was because I was shielding myself the whole time.
Right. Total control freak.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, because we have to figure out a way to manage this. When it's really difficult to manage. You can't shut this down.
Totally.
You cannot shut it down. And what I've been able to switch around on this is I consider empaths the preview of the future human.
Love it.
I believe that humanity is moving towards a more multidimensional experience and live it. We are already experiencing and knowing the unseen and the symbol that other people haven't opened up to yet. And so I believe that the type of sensitivity we have is going to be what people are seeking out. And that everything that's invisible to everyone else and visible to us is going to start being very transparent, because you can't lie to an empath.
No.
You cannot lie, you cannot fake it, you can't do anything. So if our world is moving towards a more enlightened world where everything is transparent and you cannot fool everyone, that's what empaths do already.
Yeah.
And so we experience the oneness with everyone. We know what big love is. We know what it's, don't you love everyone? I mean, every empath I know, like, loves everyone. You know, I could walk down the street and start talking to anyone.
It's odd, because I used to shield myself so much because I was just afraid of interacting with people. But now I'm like chatty patty. It's really just a totally different world.
Right. You know, you realize how much you love everyone. Empaths have this huge love. So if you feel oneness and you're centered in your heart, isn't that the definition of enlightenment?
Totally.
I mean,
well, and then I feel like with moving towards this in the world, I feel like it's just going to be an easier place to live, in the sense of everybody understanding each other a little bit more. And it doesn't take much once you realize you can have what you have, in the sense of being able to flip things on and off energy wise. But I think it's like we were speaking before we hopped on, it's people actually acknowledging that they can have this ability and being okay with it. Some people are in so much fear mode that they'll shut it down. So it's an interesting transition to get the people in fear to the okay.
Right. You know, there's a lot of healing to be done. A lot of healing. You've spent your life being told you're too sensitive. You've been told you're crazy, you're paranoid, and you know, just everything about you is too much and too hard for other people to handle. And when you've been told that for your whole life, you start to believe that you're just a bad person, that you're somehow flawed. And just like we were saying before, you have to, once you understand you're an empath, you have to go back through your life, and even all those difficult situations where, because you picked something up, you acted out someone else's anger, or you acted out someone's bad knee, and the doctor couldn't find what was wrong with your knee, and you couldn't understand why you were being angry, and you were acting out someone else's angry. And every time you think back to those things, you kind of wince and say, you know, what was wrong with me? But now when you look back as an empath, you can start putting this in context and start forgiving yourself, understanding yourself. Understand that it was the people that you were around that had no clue, that that's who they were, that's what they knew, that's all they knew. But now you know, and so now you can start standing up for yourself. But it can be a long healing process to get to that point where you actually affirm the greatness of your empathic qualities. Not overinflate, not underinflate, but just really, stand in your own power.
I know for myself, I was kind of just I was feeling so psychotic and so insane with cyclical thought process that I didn't sleep for days and days. And I'm almost 36 weeks pregnant, and this occurred while I was pregnant. So I grouchy, pregnant, cyclical thoughts, no sleep. My husband was snoring. I mean, there was all these things, and I finally was like, I just give up. And I was like screaming to the world.
Oh.
And that's the next morning is when I discovered what I was.
Oh.
So it's a matter of, to me, like literally surrendering and like setting the intention of just help me, and it'll come. I mean, it will come when it's supposed to. And I truly believe that. And I literally, like, I honestly thought I was insane. Like, even told my husband, I was like, I think something is seriously wrong with me right now. I don't know what it is. He's like, maybe it's hormones because of the baby. I'm like, no, it's something more than that. It's a matter of timing and the willingness to finally give up on the mental aspect of things and just let somebody else take it by the wheel,
Right. So you had to hit kind of rock bottom. But I do find that when you're pregnant, you actually get more sensitive.
Yes.
I mean, here you are empathically connected to this child within you, and you can't just control it being on the inside. It's on the outside too.
Yeah.
But you brought up an interesting point, because I find that it's really difficult for empaths to sleep in another bed with someone.
It's interesting because my husband's a firefighter. So when he's gone, I sleep like a rock. And when he's here, I'm like, apparently the other morning I told him, I don't really care if you even sleep outside right now. I just need to sleep. And I don't remember telling him that. I was like, oh, I'm really sorry. But yeah, it's an interesting process. And it's funny because I never really realized it until I realized the energy issue that was going on. Because he can literally fall asleep on a bed of rocks and pins and needles. It doesn't matter. He's like this. And me, I'm like, I'm looking at him like, I wish I could be asleep right now.
I know. And, we're asleep in a bed with someone like for 6 to 8 to 10 hours. That's a long time for energy to commingle.
Totally.
And it is when you're both asleep, or if you do get to sleep. And that's one of the things. Let's see, we've been married, for a long time now. So I can say to my husband, you know what? It feels like you're buzzing. It feels like I put a quarter in the bed and like it's vibrating. I said, would you mind going upstairs? And because he understands, on those nights, we actually sleep separately, and it's perfectly fine. It's because we understand each other.
Right. And that's huge too, because my husband is super supportive. And so he literally is like, do you want me to go sleep out and like on the couch, or like, what do you like? Our spare room is now the nursery. So he's like, do you want me to go sleep somewhere else? And my heart doesn't want him to, but I'm like, but maybe you should, so I can sleep. And I know it's not a bad thing. It's just a matter of getting used to new communication styles of, hey, listen here, dude, like you're totally throwing me off. Like I cannot sleep, and it's just our energy. And when I tell him those things now, he's like, at first, and this is still very new for me, but at first when I would say that, he'd look at me with 12 heads, but now he's like, okay, I get it, because he understands I'm a totally different person when I'm just feeling better and I actually have sleep. So it's just different.
Well, it's interesting when you look at people's energy who sleep together, whether it's empaths or not, when you're in that bed for a long time and no one's awake, the strongest aura, whoever has the strongest aura, envelops the one with the less strong aura.
Interesting.
And so when someone comes to me like for a medical intuitive session, and I see their aura kind of pushed in on one side, I said, what side of the bed do you sleep on? You know, and it's because their energy field has collapsed over that whole period of being pressured, having the pressure from the stronger field. And so they might have a compromised immune system or kinds of aches and pains just from that energetic interaction by sleeping with someone. Nothing bad intended, totally unconscious, but it has its impact. It's amazing.
Totally. Now you're saying that, it's like my left side.
Right.
It's
right.
Always,
exactly.
Always a knot.
Right. Right. And picking
That's
up
crazy.
anyone else's tension for a long time becomes yours after a while.
Yeah, and my husband, he's a very, very highly sensitive person. He just hasn't gotten to that point, like we were talking about, acknowledging it. And he gets it, but he's so logical with things. He's just not ready to be there yet. But he's a fixer, and he loves fixing everyone. And he's a paramedic, and he just takes care of everyone. I mean, like our dogs, both of our parents, like he has to make sure everything is ducks in a row. And I feel that tension from him sometimes. I'm like, you can't always control things, babe. Like, what can I help you with? And he's like, nothing, I got it. And I'm like, but I feel that tension. And that's funny that you bring that up with the sleep thing. That's very interesting. Now I need to like definitely dive into that with him about, like, he needs to start releasing some of this energy.
Right. Well, if you're highly sensitive or empathic, having someone in pain or discomfort around you makes you uncomfortable
Totally.
or in pain. So it brings out the fixer in us. And if we're a healer archetype, it goes into overdrive.
Yeah.
So we just gets consumed with trying to fix someone else. It's ultimately a little bit of manipulative because we're actually doing it for ourselves so that we would feel better and more relaxed. And that's the only way we could figure out how to do that. Instead, you could learn how to bring your energy back, ground yourself, connect with the earth, with your body, get comfortable with your body, get to know your body. A lot of empaths haven't even been in their body for years.
Right.
And learn how to find that really comfortable place in your body. You know, yoga and Tai Chi and things like that, Qigong, are really good for helping learn how to manage your energy. And I find that it becomes truly an energy management process to be able to be in the world.
Well, and that's kind of what I've boiled things down to, and why I've chosen to interview the people that I've interviewed is because it really, to me, we know what we are, but it's how we manage. And by managing it, it's our energy. So that's why I'm having energy healers and just picking different people's brains on how they manage things, because everybody says energy, but everybody manages it differently.
Right.
Which is interesting. So obviously each person is different, but being able to have as many tools in your tool belt to figure out what you think might work best for you, I think is huge.
Definitely. First of all, learning what energy is and what your experience of it is the very first step. And empaths tend to go outward rather than inward because all their nervous system tendrils are focusing outward. And so sometimes it's really hard to just tune in and sense what energy feels like in your body.
Right.
And so you need a very beginning kind of instruction with feedback so that whatever your process is, someone might be able to say to you, yeah, what you're feeling there is energy, that's not anxiety.
Right.
Some people confuse energy and anxiety really easily because they both kind of have a electric feeling.
Right.
And then learning how to discern what it feels like when your stomach's tense, let's say, and what the energy or your feeling is where it's getting blocked up. And so it's a real beautiful learning process about yourself. But starting out with some kind of program where you learn to understand your own energy and be able to own it, recognize it, and then clear it. So I think the basics are tuning into the energy, figuring it out, learning how to create a greater flow, and then learning how to build your energy and your magnetism, which then becomes your protective bubble, so you don't have to defend. You're just filling up with your beautiful energy, and it becomes its own protection and you can stay relaxed within that rather than being tense all the time, which is what happens when you defend. So there's just some basics in there no matter what you do.
I love that. It's everything in a nutshell, I think. And I think that it's vital if you want to learn to live a harmonious life for the rest of your life, because you don't have to feel so scattered and so crazy if you know how to manage your energy. And I think that's huge.
You know, Larry Dossey, have you ever heard of Larry Dossey? He has a great book called One Mind. And when you read that, find out that empaths are actually experiencing the one mind. Okay. And it's non-local. It doesn't need time and space.
Right.
To experience it, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's also the interesting aspect of being a very logical person, is that you have to start letting that stuff go to be able to comprehend logically, which is kind of odd, because you need to just chill out and let it go, but you need to understand what you're getting at too. But it's just a matter of really the balance of how much you want to become in tune with yourself.
Right. And then the people around you. So like when my husband has a headache, my left eye tears.
I love it. That's so funny. You're like,
it's like you kind of logically actually start putting things together to understand. And, it's interesting because, if someone's angry, that's really hard for an empath to be around.
Totally.
And our old dog, when my husband would get angry, let's say he was fixing something and he just swore at the nail or whatever, the dog would just shoot through the house and go hide in the bathroom behind the toilet. And we're kind of like that dog.
Totally. I can't stand it.
It doesn't matter if he's on the back deck or in China. I would feel that. There's no time and space, no distance.
That's so true. So you've answered many of my questions, but I want to hear your tips and tricks for a parent that have a little one, or somebody who, they could be a teenager, really, just your child that you believe has empathic tendencies. Do you have any tips to help the parent? Because I feel like being new at this parenting thing and now harnessing my own gifts, it's a little overwhelming because the parent side gets in the way of wanting to make sure that they're okay. So I feel like some tips and tricks would be amazing.
Sure. The first thing for parents, though, is if you see that you have a child that's an empath, and it's a little hard to accept because your tendency is to dismiss them, to dismiss because they don't know how to verbalize necessarily what's going on. And I had a student, I teach at a local university too, and I had a student, when I started talking about empaths, she just burst out into tears. She said, when I was young, like between 4 and 10, if my parents took me to the grocery store, to Walmart or something like that, I burst into tears and threw tantrums until they took me home. She didn't know how to say that this place was overwhelming me, that she was so uncomfortable in her skin that she couldn't stand it. But luckily she had that listened to her and took her out of those situations really quickly if she got into that state. But the most influential, the biggest influence on a child is the parents. And if the parents are in conflict or having any kind of tension between them, you're going to see that child do something in response to that.
Totally.
And so in that case, you're being invited to clean up your own act.
It's so true.
I would say first. And then there are a few things. When our kids were 2 years old, we started teaching them progressive relaxation and all the bones and muscles in their bodies. We actually, every night before we went to bed, Ken would lie in bed with one and I would lie in bed with another. And every night we would go through a progressive relaxation, because relaxation is the most important skill, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
So if you know how to relax yourself, you can come back to yourself.
Right.
So we taught them progressive relaxation, and like by the time they were 3, they were leading us in progressive relaxation. And we also taught them about the bones and muscles in their body, like so they could name them all and touch them all. And it gave them a real solid sense that they're in a body.
Right.
Okay? So that was one of the things. I have a whole list here. The other thing is having a physician or your healthcare providers understand what being an empath is.
That's my mission right now, trying to find one.
Really, really important, because that healthcare provider has to understand that there's a child sitting in front of them that is experiencing something. And even if every test shows that there's nothing wrong, there's still something to explore with that child.
Right.
Okay. So I have a list of like 25 questions that a doctor should be asking when someone comes in who's an empath, to kind of dig around and find out what they're picking up if it's not actually their illness or incident.
Right.
Okay. So I think that's really important.
Huge.
And then really big, because how many empaths have gone to the doctor and being told practically you're a hypochondriac, because there's nothing wrong with you. Yeah, right. So,
so true.
So that is so damaging. I mean, if you get to the point where you hate going to the doctor because the doctor's not, or a healthcare provider, because they're not really helping you figure out what's wrong.
Right.
So, either they're going to send you to a psychiatrist for medication or tell you you're crazy and send you back home. That's not what you want. You want someone that really understands the mind-body connection.
Totally.
And then there's this education system.
Yes.
And you have to be willing to speak to the teachers and the administration, stand up for your child.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, kids with ADD, that word wasn't invented then. They were the hyperactive kids that were the bad kids in the class.
Right.
And my daughter's a second grade teacher, and the number of strategies that they have for children with ADD or ADHD now is amazing. They really support them and help them get through their classroom experience with all kinds of supports and help. So they're not considered the bad kid. They're considered a child with a certain brain configuration. That's what they have. So that's what's got to happen with empaths. Because I remember sitting in classes, like a math class, and I loved math, but I would fuzz out. I would just go into foggy brain, couldn't think, and couldn't figure things out.
Totally. Yep.
Right? If the teacher was having a bad day, it would be even worse.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
If there were kids in the class abused or having problems with their families, it was just all wafting through me. And I couldn't think straight. And so the environment, you can't control everything, but there needs to be some accommodations.
Right, for
like
sure.
there are for kids with other brain differences. Okay?
No, I totally agree.
To speak to wherever your child is going to school. I think figuring out their allergies. is really important. If they have food allergies or environmental allergies that are contributing to their discomforts, if you can eliminate those, you really get a chance to take some burden off the child. It's really important. And with the way things are today, there's so many toxic things that your child could be really sensitive to a lot of things. I've seen that keeping an alkaline diet can help keep the sensitivities from going totally out of control. I have a few more things here. Let me see. Because I made a whole list. Maybe I'll send it to you and put it on your site. Making sure, watch your child as they get older, and make sure they don't go into any kind of addictive types of behavior. Because for anyone, actually, that's a sign that they're reacting to something. I know in third grade, I read something like 370 books. All I did was read. And it was a particularly difficult time for my parents. And so every time I came home, I opened a book, sat down in a chair, and I was reading so much that I actually wore the fabric off the chair because that was my escape. I couldn't tolerate the environment. And
interesting.
So I escaped into reading, which is probably a positive addiction, but
it's still,
yeah, it kept me isolated, not wanting to go out and play, I was hiding. So you have to watch those things with your children.
I think it's so important too, is just the observation factor of like watching your child's tendencies, because I mean, as a kid myself, I didn't have any addictive process. Like, you're a parent forever. So my addiction started when I was able to drink. And then that's when I became like a full-blown alcoholic for years. And then finally, one of the things that I decided, I literally like woke up one morning and was like, I'm done. And I was. And that's just being like able to shut it off, because I knew what I was doing was an addiction. So I just stopped. But as a parent, if I were still living near my parents, I'm sure it would drive them nuts and it would hurt them that I was in that addictive process. So just because you have a kid doesn't necessarily mean they're little. So you always need to be aware of their personality traits and see if they're going into that addictive mode.
Right. And talking to them in ways that are more imaginative to help them find ways of expressing themselves. Because if a child says to you, oh, a black cloud came over from that person and landed on me, that might be the best way they have of saying that this is impacting me and I'm picking up that person's cancer or headache or negative feelings, So you have to explore that with the child. You have to find a way to get the language, because we don't have it in English. We have metaphors and we have similes. So that black cloud it's a simile, and other languages actually have terms for the subtle worlds. So you can go to Sanskrit or Hebrew or Quechua with the Andean people, and for every dimension, there's a different vocabulary that identifies that it's in the more subtle, unseen world. So if you don't have language that's common to everyone about the subtle world, then no one's going to recognize the subtle world. Language is really, really important. So all we have are similes and metaphors. And so you have to be very imaginative out to help your child figure out a way to communicate what's going on, because it's just going to turn into a tantrum, a depression, or some other kind of behavior that doesn't suit or benefit the child because they can't express it.
Right. It's so true.
It's hard.
It's interesting now that I am a parent, because there's certain things that I'm like, oh, do I need to be more alarmed with this or that? It's just this instinct of wanting to protect. So as a parent, you also need to shield yourself to not have blinders on too, and have them assume your emotions or assume that they are doing something. So learning the fine line is huge. And for open communication, I think is major too with your spouse or whomever you're raising that child with, because being on that same page of how you raise them is huge too.
It's really important. I remember early on, my husband didn't quite get it. And if we were arguing about something after the kids were in bed, I would say, no, we can't do this because you're actually, sending negative vibes throughout the whole house and they're going to be affected. And like, he really thought I was crazy with that. He now understands that, I'm happy to say, as a grandfather. But it's that sensitive in a child's environment that they're picking those kinds of things up, especially in their sleep.
So true. I love it.
And so they'll also, there's a fine line between being an empath and being a psychic, and your intuitive wisdom and your physical sensitivities. And you kind of have to sort out for each one of those what it is about your child. It might be very specific to one little area.
Right.
I also was very psychic as a child and had no one to discuss it with. And so I had the discomfort of being an empath and also all this psychic stuff going on that I had no idea.
Oh, that would be awful because you're like lost.
I know. But it was really interesting. Something was revealed to me when I was 26 years old. My grandfather was an internist, a medical doctor, and he was famous for being able to diagnose people within 60 seconds. Everyone in the area who couldn't figure out what was wrong with someone would bring them to my grandfather. My grandfather died when I was 11. When I was 26, he came to me in a vision, and he opened up the top of my head and poured all of his wisdom and being into me. And it was then, the next morning when I woke up, that I had the medical intuitive information in my being, which wasn't psychic, but it was more empathic. And so now I know there was a genetic connection between grandfather and myself, because this has a genetic component.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you're an empath, yep.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sarah, we are out of time, and I wish that I could sit here for another 24 hours and just talk with you, because this has been a very interesting and humbling experience in the sense of not only did I learn a lot, but now I need to educate myself so much more in so many different areas. I really love it. Can you let people know where they can find you?
Oh, right there. Okay. So my website is spirithealinstitute.com. Spirit Heal, all one word, HEAL, SPIRITHEAL, institute.com. And that's the best place. I have lots of blogs about empaths and all kinds of energy work there. So a lot of free audio meditations that you can access and use for yourself, download. And if there's any questions, just email me from the site. I'll be happy to answer.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know that I learned a ridiculous amount, and I can't wait for everybody to watch this interview.
And thank you for everything you're doing, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
So we'll be in contact again, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure.